Hey everyone, welcome. All right. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. Welcome. Thanks for coming out. This is a informational meeting on the Buckley Solar Facility. My name is Chris Clark. I'm a senior siting analyst with the Oregon Department of Energy. Before I get started, I'll just go ahead and have everybody give a quick introduction. So,
hi, Phoebe Bartley, also with Oregon Department of Energy, Siting Division.
yeah, Todd, you want?
Yeah, not a mic, but Todd Cornett. I manage the Energy Facility Siting Division of the Department of Energy.
Great. We're also joined here by the applicant team from Clean Air. I'll let you all introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Brittany Weber. I'm a senior development specialist.
Hello, everybody. For those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Eric Demmer, and I'm Director of Development. And good evening, everybody. I'm Paul Balo, I'm a consultant at the University of Maryland.
All right. So tonight we are going to give you, us from the department are going to give you a quick overview of what is included in the Energy Facility Siting Council's siting process. Phoebe is going to give you some helpful resources that the department has through our website and some online tools, and then we'll turn it over to the applicant team to give an overview of the facility itself. After that, we'll have an opportunity for anybody here that wants to provide comments or ask questions about the project. I'll be able to answer questions about the siting process. The applicant team's here to answer any questions you have about the facility itself. It'll be a nice moderated discussion. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So this meeting is intended to give you all an opportunity to get more information about the proposal and to provide comments on the NOI. Just so you know, this is not what's called a contested case hearing in our process. Your participation here tonight is not required to preserve issues for standing in the contested case. That'll happen much later on in the process after we've received an application and after the department's issued its initial order. Again, just as a formality, please hold your questions and comments until that Q&A session at the end. And then we may impose time limits if we have a lot of interest. So I was just hoping if anybody here is here and you haven't turned in one of these forms, or even if you have, I guess, you can just raise your hand real quick if you want to ask a question or give comments tonight, just so I can see how many folks we might have. Okay, good number. Nancy, did you see how many people we have on the webinar?
Got 9 people online.
Okay. We don't need to do a show of hands there, but so good. Some good comments, and yeah, we'll see what our numbers look like when we get to that point in the presentation. Okay, so the proposed Buckley solar facility, I'm just going to give a quick overview. The applicant team will give a much more in-depth overview in just a few minutes. But it's a proposed solar facility that would be located here in Sherman County. The proposed site boundary included in the notice of intent that we received includes 7,852 acres located about 8 miles southwest of our location here in Grass Valley. The site's made up of private land that's zoned for exclusive farm use and would be primarily accessed by Oregon Route 216. The main components that the facility would include are 1,200 megawatts of solar photovoltaic arrays and 1,200 megawatts of battery energy storage and a battery energy storage system that has 4-hour discharge capacity. The facility would also include up to 3 collector substations, 500 kV transmission lines connecting those collector substations to the existing Buckley substation, an electrical collection system, O&M building, and then other supporting facilities like roads and fences and gates. Again, you'll get a much more detailed overview of what's included when the applicant team gives their presentation. To give you an idea of who we are at the Oregon Department of Energy's Siting Division, we support the work of the Oregon Energy Facility Siting Council, which is a volunteer body appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate to oversee the review, decision-making, and compliance for most large-scale energy generating facilities and infrastructure in Oregon. The Energy Facility Siting Council, or FSEC, is the decision-making authority, and they make the final decision on whether to approve or deny an application for site certificate. And then again, me and my colleagues at the department serve as their staff, both on technical issues and facilitating the siting process itself. That process, the siting process, is a consolidated process between different state agencies and local governments. So we'll be working with our colleagues across the state, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, Oregon Land Conservation and Development Commission, all other kind of agencies with subject matter expertise over the areas that we work in. And then we'll also be working closely with the local government, both the county and affected local municipalities during our review process. That process reviews the proposal for compliance with a set of standards adopted by the council, as well as other applicable state laws and rules and local land use ordinances. As I'll show in a few slides, it will provide several opportunities for the public to both hear about the project and also participate in the process and provide comments. And then, like I mentioned, it'll coordinate that review from different reviewing agencies, the state agencies, local governments, and also affected tribal governments. FSEC only reviews facilities that are considered energy facilities under state statute. The state statute in question is shown up here on the screen, and for solar facilities, state jurisdictions set by the number of acres used by the facility, and so that is based on the capability classification of the underlying land. So for high-value farmland, the state has jurisdictions over any facilities that use 240 acres or more. For other cultivated or arable land, it's 2,560 acres or more, and then for other land, it's 3,840. Since this proposed facility would use up to 7,852 acres, we will have jurisdiction over the facility regardless of the underlying land capability classification. And I'm just going to stop. I got a ping that I failed to mention that this meeting is being recorded here tonight, just so you all know, and that we will be posting the recording to our website afterwards. So sorry I didn't mention that earlier, but I just want to make sure you have it. So this slide shows an overview of how the siting process works. It also shows that we're right here at the very beginning. So again, we're really excited to have you all here tonight so we can get your feedback early. We can hear what your thoughts are about the project right now. As the slide shows, there's 7 major steps in the siting process, starting with the notice of intent and ending with a final order. And if that order is approved, site certificate. During the notice of intent stage, we get the initial notice of intent from the applicant team, which includes kind of a basic description of the site. It's legally required to contain enough information so we can set the legal requirements and study requirements that are applicable to the review of the facility throughout the rest of the process. It also includes this opportunity for public comment and public engagement, as well as agency coordination. What we'll do with all the information that we get from the applicant team and from you all is prepare a project order, which is kind of the legal document that sets the actual legal requirements of what the applicant will have to provide in their application. The application process will start with a preliminary application, which we'll review for completeness. And there will also be opportunities for public comment there, as well as on our draft proposed order, which is our initial evaluation of what's included in that application. And then we kind of move on to the more formal review of a proposed order, potential contested case, or a mandatory contested case for an application, and then a final order. All where you see all the green squares on the slide is where there will be an opportunity for public comment or a public notice, or an opportunity for people that have participated earlier in the process to continue to apply. We strongly recommend that if you're interested in participating in this process or other siting projects, that you do sign up to get notices. We have some notification requirements for adjacent landowners, but the best way to make sure that you get all of our notices is to sign up online, and we can show you how to do that afterwards. If not, otherwise it's pretty easy to find the link through our webpage, and I'll have that link towards the end of my presentation, and Evie will also show you what we show. Great, and then all the teal squares also show agency coordination. And I just, one thing that's not shown on this slide that you should be aware of is that the citing process is unique somewhat in that if there's a request for judicial review, any project subject to FSEC jurisdiction, the appeal would go to the Supreme Court directly instead of a lower court. So I brought up reviewing agencies several times during this presentation. Those are agencies that we solicit comment from and technical expertise on elements of the proposed facility that are within their jurisdiction or expertise. So, for example, we would go to Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife to get their recommendations on impacts to fish and wildlife habitat within the proposed site boundary. We work with other agencies with similar expertise on their issues of areas of interest. Those reviewing agencies also make recommendations regarding the size and location of analysis areas. I'll show you what our analysis areas are set by rule for the NOI in a moment, but if there's resources of interest that might be outside of those areas or areas where there's little possibility for impact, we may make adjustments to those for the application. We also welcome comments on that from members of the public. And then again, we also ask reviewing agencies to identify studies that should be conducted to identify potential impacts, statutes, administrative rules, applicable substantive criteria, or other local ordinances that are administered by those agencies that should be included in the site certificate or maybe otherwise applicable to the proposed facility. And then we also ask for any permits that are administered by that agency or local government that might apply to the construction or operation of the proposed facility. We are required by statute to appoint the governing body of the local government that's affected by the facility as a special advisory group. So the local county court here in Sherman County will be the special advisory group for this facility, and we'll be working with them closely throughout the review. As I mentioned, so what we are really reviewing for is compliance with the citing standards adopted by the council and then other applicable state laws and rules. This slide shows all the FSEC citing standards that are applicable to all facilities, and then a couple that are just applicable to certain types of facilities. As you can see, these standards cover a pretty wide range of topics. We have everything from organizational expertise to wildfire prevention and risk mitigation. These are the issues that we will be looking for information on in the application, and looking generally to ensure that there's no significant adverse impacts to protected resources, and that risks to public health and safety are minimized in different ways. It's also good to know that the council's jurisdiction is somewhat limited to these areas. So if there's not an applicable standard or another state law or rule related to citing of the facility, the council may not be able to address it through their orders. We consider that out of their jurisdiction. So there are other agencies that continue to be involved in the oversight and permitting decisions with the agencies as well. Also good to note that we don't have jurisdiction over federal issues. So things like interconnection with the substation, if it's a federal BPA substation or something that we don't have direct control. Okay, as I mentioned, one of the things that we're doing right now is looking for appropriate analysis areas. Those are often the same as the study areas that are used in the NOI. So if you find our notice and get a link to the NOI, you'll see that these were the areas that were considered when evaluating impacts for that notice itself. For a lot of resources where there are maybe direct impacts, but not indirect impacts from things like noise or traffic, the study area is the site boundary itself, such as for historic, cultural, and archaeological resources. If you go out a little further, we have a 0.5 mile study area for land use, for wildfire impacts and risk, and for fish and wildlife habitat. Moving out to things that are more impacted by visual impacts or traffic, or other more sensitive resources, we move out to 5 mile. That applies to recreational opportunities and threatened and endangered species. And then 10 miles for scenic resources that are designated by the local government as significant or important, and 20 miles for protected areas. And that includes all sorts of state and federal specially designated places, like the National Scenic Area, for example, or a state park, or national park.
So the site that I don't understand.
Okay, sorry.
So this right here, you're saying for this. Sorry.
Yeah. So I'll restate it a little bit. So yeah. Sure.
And then kind of an example.
Yeah, so for every facility, what that slide was showing is what our standard areas are. So for a scenic resource here in Sherman County, we would be looking at the black line here on the screen, which is their proposed site boundary, plus 10 miles around that to see what places might be impacted by the visual aspects of this facility. Whereas if you wanted to see a nice view from 10 miles away, where could this be in the view shed? But that's as far as we're making them go out with their analysis. So if somebody in the public or a reviewing agency were to say, we know of a resource that's 15 miles away that we think could be impacted, we might change that 10-mile radius to go out a little bit further to catch that extra area. And so that's all we're saying. For a lot of things, we really are just looking at what's inside of that black outline, because that's what's going to be directly impacted. But yeah, there can be other. Okay. Yeah.
So, when we went back to that list of things that falls under. Yeah, I was just wondering where the people, just like health and comfort people, and things like that, where, on the full side.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, and so there are some things that we look at that don't have an analysis area with them, and that would be if we're looking to see is the design of the facility safe. We'll just be looking at what's actually being proposed, what they're building, but we might not need to go look outside of the site to say what's around here. But something like wildfire, where we know if a fire were to start inside of the facility and could spread, we will be asking them to go, at least in this case, the standard is to go at least a half mile out to see what homes or sensitive resources might be near the facility that could be at risk of a fire if a fire were to start in the facility site or travel through. Yeah.
And it's just later with the question and answer.
Please. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, you saying that you were going to study those things, but you haven't yet released the impact report of these questions?
Exactly, yeah. So the part of the process, the facility, the department's at right now, for us, and the applicant team can kind of tell you more about what they've already done when we get to that point of the process, but we're just setting out what questions basically we need answered to decide whether or not to recommend to the council to approve this facility. So we haven't received these studies yet, and right now we're looking to see if we basically how much we want studied. And again, these are kind of the standard distances that we would go. But for example, if we were to say, there's a recreational, if we hear that there's a recreational opportunity that people are concerned about, that's a little outside of this 5 mile area. That's something we would ask the applicant to address when they submit their application to us. So yeah, right now we have a notice of intent, which again is very, very high level information. And we're trying to get the scoping down so we know what questions we want answered when we get an actual application. And I just have a few more slides, so thank you all for one, getting clarification, and two, bearing with me. Oh, yeah. Great. So one of the big parts of our process is looking at land use and looking specifically for compliance with the statewide planning goals. There's 2 ways that applicants can satisfy our land use standard by statute. One is to get land use approval from the council, from AFSEC, or to go to the affected local government. In the NOI, the applicant has indicated that they intend to get a land use approval directly from the Energy Facility Siting Council, in which case the council would be conducting the land use review that's usually conducted by the county. That's not a final election at this point. The final election will come when the application is submitted. And so we do just want to keep people notice that we'll be notifying everybody that we can through our notification process if that election changes. But if it does, interested persons should participate in the local land use process or land use hearings there because they will be separate. So just something to keep track of as this goes forward. Okay, and then as I've mentioned several times, there is a public comment period associated with the NOI, and that we really are looking for questions about the proposed facility, questions about impacts that may occur, and then just general concerns or comments related to the facility. Any written comments that are submitted to the department are included in the public record and provided to the applicant. And any comments to be considered, any comments must be received by October 10th at 5 p.m. We all have my contact information, which you can provide comments after that. It's also included in the notices on the table over there. Any oral comments provided tonight will also be considered comments, public comments, and maybe provided in the applicant's presentation. If you are planning on providing comments now, please do fill out one of these white forms from the table over there and get it up to me so I can call your name. And again, just to restate one time, this isn't a public hearing, so your participation in this comment or the oral comment period are not required to establish your standing to continue participating in this process. We obviously do want to hear from you as early as we can, but there will be more opportunities later on. And then other opportunities, the public hearing at the draft proposed order phase in particular, you will need to participate in if you want to have the opportunity to request to participate in the contested case later on. I'll notice one thing I didn't mention is that we will likely be back out here for another community meeting once we have a complete application in place. So this again won't be the only opportunity for you all to address us in person.
This is the only opportunity.
No, sorry, this will not be your only opportunity to see us in person or ask us questions. Yeah, and then we are also required to have a public hearing in the vicinity of the proposed facility. So, yeah, we will be back in Sherman County or very close vicinity for that as well. Okay, before I turn it over to Bibi, we do, and before I turn it over to Bibi, we do have just a few helpful resources on our webpage. We have a public comment portal, which Bibi will give a good overview of. There's more information about this project specifically, including the notice of intent that we received, our public notice. We'll post a recording of tonight's meeting there, and any other related materials that come in through the process. So that's a good place to check. You just kind of want to see where the process is at or get more information about this project. We can show you the link to this project, but it's the easiest way to go is to oregon.gov/energy, and you can direct yourself there. We also have public guides and handouts that can teach you more about the setting process as well. Great. And so, again, my name is Chris Park, and you can find my contact information here. I'm happy to get this to you after the meeting as well if you don't write it down, but yeah, I see people are taking pictures, so that's even better. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over.
Hello, so I'm here to give you a little bit of kind of information on how to interact with our website and some useful tools on there. As Chris mentioned, we have a public comment portal. So if you didn't want to come up and speak tonight, but you do have questions or concerns about the project, the public comment portal for this project specifically is open until October 10th at 5 p.m. And the best way to get there is through here. Coming to this website, which is also listed on the public notice. I believe, yeah, is also listed on the public notice. That will take you to this homepage, and you'll click Submit a Comment, Energy Facility Siting. And then from there, click the drop-down menu. This is from an older project, the original screenshots from an older project, so it was Wagon Trail, but when you go to that site, you will see Buckley listed. You read the information about that specific project, just kind of a short blurb about it, and then start putting in your contact information. Only the fields with an asterisk are required. And then you'll go to create a comment in the corner there, and that's going to open up a folder. There's a comment summary. If you have a very long comment, there is a section to attach a file. So if your comment is, substantial and you don't want to sit there and write it out and you want to be able to save it and come back to it, we do recommend writing it in a separate document and uploading that document as your public comment. And then from there, you just click submit and you're done. You'll see a kind of complete screen, and your public comment will come up on our public comment database, basically. Any questions about this before we media or during? Yes. To restate the question for those online, the question was, will these comments be viewable to the public? Yes, they are viewable. I don't have the website pulled up and I didn't make a slide on that, but if you go to the tab up there that says receive comments/data, that would pull up all of the public comments made about any of the FSEC projects. And then there's fields to help you filter down to comments specific to projects you might be interested in. Second question for those online was, do they post immediately or do you have to wait until the final submission closes? They will post immediately.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up with that. If you submit through the comment portal, they'll post immediately. If you submit in writing or like send us an email with an attachment, it will sometimes take us a few days to get it posted to the portal.
Moving on, some of you came over and visited us on the big computer over there and saw that we had some maps pulled up. We have this really wonderful tool called the ARESA mapping tool. Again, you start at the ODA website and filter down to energy facilities under review in this case, which is where you will find the Buckley solar facility proposal. Once you're on that Buckley page, if you scroll down to location, you'll see a PDF map or an online map. If you click that online map link, that will open up the ARESA map, and that gives you a fuller view of the site boundary itself of the proposed facility. And there's a lot of options within that once you start clicking around on how to see different layers of different things you might be interested in. Like we have somebody asking about where the transmission lines were running through this facility. That's one of the layers you can pull up here and be able to see that, and the substation that's also in the middle of the facility or proposed facility. In order to navigate choosing those layers, you just click on the little plus minus symbols over here, and then click your checkbox on or off in order to see different layers of this map. When you initially pull up a map from a site page, you'll only see the boundary about that specific facility. If you'd like to see those other layers, you're going to click down the menu up here and choose all available layers, and that opens up significantly more options for you. One of the things that some people like to see is the topographic map instead of the kind of overall aerial map. And then you can also change different settings within that. Highly recommend playing with it a little bit. And if you have questions, contacting us. It's a very powerful tool with a lot of different aspects to it. But you can kind of fade different layers in order to see specific features that you might be interested in within the site boundary of this project.
Here's the thing is, though, everybody knows how to run a computer.
I could pull up the website. That's an excellent comment, and I did come in with the assumption that is the case. I apologize. In order to pull this up, there is a certain amount of information you do need to know how to run a computer. That said, we are actually working on a YouTube tutorial that will go through this a little bit more step by step, and we'll start posting that out probably with our public info meeting information and emailing those links out to people. That will give you a much more step-by-step tutorial that's very user-friendly for folks that aren't as computer savvy. Or is just not on the computer very often. And that you can kind of pull up and go step by step with the map in order to find some of this. And that should be out by the end of October.
It shows us your point of view of everything, so we don't.
That will show you once you open up from a website, once you open a web browser, from that point forward. So once you open the web browser, go to our website, and then from there, the tutorial will start. My contact information is on our website. I can also give it to you personally. If you want to give me a call, I'm happy to walk you through some of this as well, one-on-one.
Yeah, and as Assistant Director Cornett just mentioned, we also just have more static maps showing different resources or different ways to look at the facility in the notice of intent itself. So you don't want to navigate all this. There are other ways to get that information. And like BB said, you can call any one of us at the department, and we're happy to kind of walk you through what we can and spend that time or help you find a different way to get the questions you have answered.
Yeah, that's super. Just these slides, would be great.
For those online, the question was, could we print out the slides in the future so that folks could have that handout and take that home with them? I believe that's something. Oh, we don't.
Yeah, I can say we have posted these slides to the website. So if you have access to that, they're just on the project page that I mentioned earlier. And I can get you that URL if you.
So yeah, there's various things you might be interested in here. Kind of figuring out additional information or what data went in to create this map. Another way to do that is to like, sorry, got completely lost in my presentation. I apologize. Is to click from down here, going to the view additional details where this arrow is, and that will open up your attribute data, and that's going to give you more specific information about the project in question. And that is everything I have for this right now. But like Chris said, these slides are available online, and we are creating a YouTube tutorial of this tool that should be ready by the end of October.
Okay, great. So yeah, thank you for that. And if you have specific questions about this, you can ask them in the question and answer period, although it might be easier just to get a hold of BB or I or one of our colleagues, and we can walk you through the demo on the screen over there itself. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to the applicant team. Thank you for being so patient while we got through that to give a little more information about the project. I guess all student sides, if you just want to tell me when you're ready for the next.
Yeah. Go ahead. You go to the first one. All right. So first of all, again, my name is Eric Demerick. I work for Clean Air. We are a Boise-based developer. We've been work specifically on solar and solar projects. Solar and storage projects. We don't do wind. It's just the solar and storage, and that's what we're working on here. We've been developing. Even though we're based in Boise, Idaho, we develop kind of all across the U.S. Largely, the projects that we have built are based largely in the West. That's just kind of a nature of the market where we have more land, so more projects get. Sorry, thank you. So we have been around now for, it's coming up on 11 years, and we have successfully developed quite a few projects, and our portfolio is continuing to grow. This is it's not our project. I know we have a facility in the next month. So our intent of these projects is we are an independent power producer, which means we want to develop, own, and operate these projects long term. That's our goal. We want to be for the foreseeable future and for the project lifetime. Typically, we expect projects to last roughly 35 years. So it's not a here really quick and then we're gone. We need to be here for 35 plus years. As well. As just a quick overview of the project. So our nameplate capacity, which is to say what size it is, we say it's up to 1,200 megawatts. The reason why I say up to in there is because that is our total interconnection capacity that we have. That is the maximum we'll be able to build. However, we don't know if we're going to be able to do all that, to be completely honest. There's still a lot of challenges out there in developing these projects. And so we're still working through some of the problems, or some of the challenges, I should say, in terms of acquiring off-takers and transmission capacity. So this.
Every time you turn around.
Sorry. Okay. I'll try to really focus on that. My apologies. But anyways, we're going to try to work to build as much of this as we can, but there's a possibility that we do build less than 1,200 megawatts. So in addition, this project will likely be built in phases. That's to mean that we will not be out here building this all at once. It will be over a period of time, and that's for a variety of reasons, from the difficulty in lining up commercial contracts for the same amount of time or to come online at the same time. Additionally, it's just a large resource strain to have that size of facility under construction. Our construction team would not be happy with me if I asked them to build that all at once. So it will be kind of over a rolling period of, I'm not quite sure exactly how many years. There's a lot of factors that still need to play out, including lining up commercial contracts. So I just wanted to be very clear with the community upfront that this will not be done in one go. If we build, it will likely be in phases, and we'll aim to have a very open line of communication with the community about what we're building. It's also, the way the rules are set up now, likely going to result in ultimately connections to our site certificate. So we will likely be back here again, assuming that we to build in multiple phases, which is what we currently anticipate. All right. So the next one I want to talk about just briefly is kind of time frame. So one of the things that's significant with our project, and part of what I think helps it out a lot to make it a good project, is that at the very center of our site is the Buckley substation. It is a very large substation that is also an old substation. Bonneville Power Administration, which is probably just called BPA for now, it's a lot easier. BPA is in the process of rebuilding that substation entirely. So we are basically tied to their timeline for when they're anticipating that they will come online at 2027. So that's assuming that they stick to that timeline. Hopefully the first phase or phases will be roughly 3 months after that. There's just certain things we can't do at the facility until get fully interconnected to an energized substation. There's a lot of testing and conditioning that happens. So that is our current target. And it's possible that may fluctuate based on Bonneville Power Administration progress. So that's also kind of one of the nice things there then too is that a helpful thing with our project is we are expected directly adjacent to a large Bonneville Power Administration substation. Our GenTie, which is basically kind of like where you plug into the grid from our project substation to where we connect, it's going to be very short. We will not be running its own sort of plus mile GenTie lines, as we call them. That puts additional infrastructure out there that can be seen for quite a way. So we're trying to limit that as much as possible. This site is very helpful in that regard. One of the frequent questions we get is job creation. And while it's difficult to estimate a exact total number over the life of the project, as like I said, hopes to build 1,200 megawatts. We'll see how much we're actually going to be able to. But generally for this is the phase that we anticipate, which could be anywhere from 150 megawatts to possible to have a 400 megawatt phase. Built those, we considered those before. At peak construction, you're likely to have 350 construction workers. How many exactly that create kind of varies because you have the different parts of the construction where you require different amount of people on the site. Initially, when civil work is happening to first get the site ready for construction, it's going to be, not an insignificant amount, but a lower amount. And then as you roll through it, at one point in construction, you could have almost all phases happening where you'll have a lot of people on site and then it will tail off. So it's not a consistent amount of people on site. It's going to vary throughout the construction life cycle. In terms of the other side of that coin is with solar. One of the things with it is that a large amount of the jobs are construction jobs. We anticipate that if we do build the full 1,200 megawatts, that will create 12 to 15 well-paying jobs in the community. And so that's one of the frequent things we hear about solar, and just want to get that number that's out there right now on what that is, because it is front heavy in terms of the job creation, but it still does create a handful of good jobs for the community. And I mentioned this earlier, but we do estimate that the project time is approximately 35 years. That's how we take a look at them internally. And that's typically how we line up our agreements with landowners as well. It is private landowners that we're working with. This is not on state or federal land at all. All right, and I already mentioned that we are, it is very handy that we are directly adjacent to the project substation, or sorry, to the point of interconnection, which is the Buckley substation, which does create some efficiencies with the project and reduces the amount of total infrastructure that we install.
Really into the mic, okay? Because they're having a hard time
Okay,
online hearing.
more. Okay.
Yeah. No, they're just having a hard time online.
Really quickly, address a few things. The first is what exactly we're aiming to build. When people think of solar, they sometimes think of many different things. What we are suggesting building is a solar photovoltaic system. This is not the concentrated solar that there's a handful of operating facilities in the US, which are basically mirrors designed to catch the sun and point it at a central tower to heat it up to really high levels. We are not that. These are the solar panels that are similar to what you'd see on someone's roof. They're typically these days bifacial, meaning they generate electricity from both sides. So that there's enough reflection of light off the ground to help them generate on both sides, and it's cost efficient. We also typically, and at least this is what we expect right now, with construction still a few years out, or I should say potentially a couple of years out, this technology may change, but at least what we anticipate right now and what we're building at other sites is we do expect these to be what are called single axis tracker, which means that these rows will be oriented north to south, and then as the sun rises in the east, the panels will turn to face the sun as it rises throughout the day, slowly track across to generate the maximum amount of energy that they can. That right now is the most efficient way. We don't know yet because we're doing additional design work, whether it'll be a single panel mounted on that or put two panels end to end. So we are anticipating for when we submit our preliminary application for site certificate, we'll be analyzing the worst case impact. So we'll be looking at that as tall as possible, acknowledging that there's a decent chance that it could be less height and having less impact. But throughout this process, we'll be analyzing the worst case impacts, which means building the full 1,200 megawatts as well as the maximum height on those panels that we could potentially see.
You require energy to.
There are, yeah, and we can. Oh, thank you, Todd. So the question was, and forgive me if I get it wrong, was so do they actually require energy to turn those? And yes, there are very small motors on those that do occasionally just quickly click on, and it's very small movements. So they're very quiet and they do require a little bit of energy. However, the extra generation is greatly exceeds to turn those. And so the other part of solar that I want to talk about is, as you can kind of see in the picture, and this is actually a picture from one of our facilities down in Mexico that I helped work on, is that these solar panels are mounted on steel racking. They, in most places, they are those beams, the piers that they're mounted on are simply driven into the ground based on the subsurface conditions out here. That may or may not be the case. There are other ways of mounting those, but as we have not done our subsurface geotechnical assessment yet, and we don't know exactly what kind of technology we're going to be using. Best case scenario, we're driving piles, and what's nice about those, and actually any system that we're likely to be using, is that the removal is actually quite simple because there's most likely will not be any poured concrete on those. It's easy to go through and kind of pull those out to help when the facility is done to try to decommission it as best as possible to the original state. From those panels, there'll be the most common technology right now is something called string inverters. So we'll run power to those, or it'll be switched from DC to AC collection, and then also and those are string inverters would be on most of the rows of panels. And those are quieter in a lot of the older facilities. That there's central inverters, which are bigger, louder. These ones, by having many smaller ones, it's much quieter. Additionally, at those sorry. Additionally, kind of scattered throughout the facility, there will be, and this is one of the few places where we see sort of concrete wall, is that we'll be, have our medium voltage transformers, which will then step up the power to medium voltage. And those are a little bit larger than this table that I'm at right here, concrete pad, and those need one for about every 3 to 4 megawatts. So those will be scattered throughout the facility, and then we'll simply run the power to our project substation. So in addition to the on-bill power of the substation, we have to have our own to step it up to that voltage that we're interconnecting at, which is 500 kV. Those we are working on where they're going to be located exactly. Likely they're going to be located as close as possible to the Buckley substation, just because that way you have less losses of electricity as you connect, and it's high voltage transmission lines are very expensive to build, so high voltage gen ties as well, very expensive. We're going to try to avoid those as much as possible, so we try to keep our costs lower. And the last thing before I move on from the solar is just to quickly touch on, we are.
That's a question. You said that we'll be using concrete steel wraps. So likely, but if you don't use them, maybe just the wraps and ground tiles, what's the soil depth of it? How's that work?
Just for those of you online, the question was, I mentioned that in most situations, we drive steel piers into the ground, which then we mount our racking on. If we're not able to do that, what's our ideal depth that we're looking for, I think, for like how deep do we drive them? Is that correct? Yeah. And so that answer, it varies a bit depending on what the subsoil is. If it's sandier, you have to kind of drive them deeper. If it's a more firm soil type, you don't have to drive them as deep because it'll hold them in place. Because even over a life of 35 years, the wind could slowly, this is how the soil slowly moves. Sorry? Rocks.
And folks, I'm just gonna say, we will have a question and answer period at the end, so yeah, just before we all jump in, just keep it a little orderly with if we can pull questions in the end, that'd be great. Thank you.
Happy to talk about subsoil conditions later on in the program. Anyway, the last thing I wanted to touch on is one thing that we're required to have. We are required to have a chain link fence around the outside with barbed wire on top. I wish it weren't that way, but the reality is people can think sometimes that they shouldn't. So it's a safety thing to make sure that even those who might try to steal stuff from the site, we do have copper wire and other materials in there. It's just as much to mostly to protect them. But the reality is we are actually required to have that. So that's something if there was a better way, I wish we could, but that's just the reality of it. So that's kind of the last portion of this solar, is that we will have a fence around the outside. And this is the other part I want to touch on pretty quickly is we do anticipate having storage, so batteries on the site. The most common technology right now is lithium-ion batteries, and as of now, that's what I expect. This technology is changing rapidly, but this has been the most commercially viable one for the last handful of years, and will likely be unless there's some breakthrough. These facilities that's what's pictured on the screen. They kind of look like shipping containers. They will be located right next to the project substations, and they are simply on, while they're on cement pads. This is one of the other times that we will be pouring some cement, but then on a gravel pad, and that's for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons being for fire protection. Most of these units now also have built-in fire suppression capabilities, which is very important to us to do everything we need. This is for reference. So that you're looking at, it's not fully constructed yet, but that one is also coming on in the not too distant future. So those ones are made by Tesla here in the US and Canada. Yeah, so I wanted to kind of talk about the state of the project and where we're at right now. So far, we have some different pieces that the next step is what we PASC is going to contain a lot of information. It's going to be it's what we're required to submit in order to meet those requirements of what we have to submit. It's going to be probably 1,000 pages plus. I think that's pretty common now, but it's going to be big and contain a lot of information. We're still putting that together. I wish I had all the answers right now for what we're going to do about everything, but we aren't there yet. We're still working on a preliminary design that we'll have shortly. That's going to feed into a lot of this, and we're hoping to have that in 6 to 9 months, depending on how smoothly it all goes. So that's our ideal timeline. So far, the studies that we completed include our wetland studies. So we were required to go out and map every wetland on the site, and then we submit those to the Department of State Lands for their concurrence to agree that we mapped them properly, and we already received that. So we have fully mapped all the wetlands. Luckily for us, this is in terms of wetlands, there's not too many. They're mostly down in the draws on the site, and we're going to try to avoid those as much as possible, just because they do create extra work and are costly to deal with. So it's easier just to avoid them in most places. If we have to, we might have a crossing or two, but we do not anticipate putting any solar panels in these wetlands. Also because, as you're probably aware, anytime you have a stream issue, it can be down in the draw, and it's just not going to be conducive to placing solar there. All right, the next one that we did is our habitat surveys. So we had biologists out on site to check for the habitat conditions and raptor nests and see if there's any threatened endangered species on site. We found a handful of raptor nests on site. And all this will be provided in our PASC. So forgive me if I don't know the exact species of hawks off the top of my head. But with that, those studies, we didn't find any what is called Category 1 habitat, which is the most highly protected in the state. One of the things we've been going into this project is that it is going to be listed as Category 2, the next step down, which is because of the big game winter range. I'm sure a lot of you are aware just by simply driving around out here that there is new elk that you've seen antelope as well in some places. So that's something that we're going to be working with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife on very closely. They do require, as part of the process, a habitat mitigation plan. So we are working with them to put that together. And once it is together, it will be part of our preliminary application for site certificate. So we are aware of that, and it is, no site is perfect. This is one of the challenges on the site that we will be, doing probably a significant amount of mitigation for. So be looking for that in the PASC. Next one is cultural resources. So we have completed the physics stream survey as well as our subsurface testing. I didn't think there was any interesting data waiting on that final report. But one thing I know that happened is that there is the Barlow Road cutoff goes through the site. A large portion of that is under the existing roads out there or on disturbed agriculture. So we're working with our archaeological team to see where is that is not under an existing gravel road, not under disturbed agriculture. So that is something that we're going to have to address in our PASC, and we've heard from the community and we'll keep bringing it up to us. And I know there's already a comment to the NOI the Barlow Road cutoff. So we are aware of it. We're working to try to limit any sort of impacts on the road and identify routes. Lastly, I'd like to also, one of the bigger questions we get is questions about what's the overall economic impact to the community. So it's a fairly large project. Okay. All right. Apologies to everybody online, but we are working on an economic impact analysis to take a look at what our total economic impacts are. And while by and large those are positive, we do fully acknowledge that there is, part of the land is being ranched and farmed right now. And so there is some impacts there as well. So we're going to be doing what we can to factor those in and try to work to see how we can mitigate those impacts as best as possible. And kind of my last slide is just very large up there, my contact information. I live not too far away and I plan on being out here frequently. That is my cell phone number up there, which is on me most of the time. So I will, apologize if I ignore your first call just because you get so many spam calls, but leave a message and I'll get back to you or text me and I can respond. I really believe in being out there before the community. We were out here last week, did an open house prior to this one, and we'll be really believe in having a continued strong presence out here. Like I said, we plan on owning and operating this facility long term. 35 years is a long time. We do want to try to be as good of a member of the community as we can. And so that starts with me being out here before you right now. And the other times I visited the county, we want to work with you. And if I don't know about a problem, I can't help mitigate it. So if you have concerns or, you know, anything that you think could be done better, let me know. If you guys know your community better than anybody else. If there's things that could be improved, let me know. I can try to work on it. It's better than me trying to identify these issues on my own, which I will be as well. But please raise them to me. I think I'm fairly responsive. So email, call, text. That's my information. And you will, you know, even though their next public meeting through the ESEC process is probably not, you know, in the immediate future coming up, please don't hesitate to reach out. It's easy for me to pop out here and meet with anybody if you have concerns about this part of the site or just want to chat. So with that, I think that wraps up my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Eric. And thanks everybody for bearing with us. So we're ready to have the question and answer session. If you have a question that came up or you have comments and you haven't given us one of these white sheets, please fill one out and get them to one of my colleagues over here. While we do that, I'm gonna just read people in the order that they came up on, and then I'll call up people from the phone. If you're on the phone and you want to provide comments, please go ahead and press *3 on your keypad, and that'll raise your hand. And then I'll remind you later, but when you're done commenting, please press *3 again to lower your hand. And I'll also note that as I get through questions from people here in the room, I'll just call you in order. I did get a couple of questions in writing from Misty Strayhorn. I'm going to save those to the end because I suspect some of those questions will come up from other people as well. But if there's anything that we haven't covered at the end, I'll read those for you as well. Great. So with that, the first person I have is Shandy Johnson. So if you could come up to the microphone and give a comment. Yeah, and please talk into the mic so people on the website.
So I appreciate you doing a public Q&A so everybody can hear the questions and everybody can hear the answers that are being presented on behalf of the committee. One question I had that I asked at the last open house that you had was in regards to fires. Fires are a very common thing in our area, and they're devastating when they happen. And a lot of times they start by natural causes like lightning. However, there are sometimes when they start by accidental situations. For example, a combine catching fire. When they're mowing a field, a rock might get hit and it sparks and starts a fire. Most farmers, pretty much all the farmers around here are strong advocates of fighting fires. They fight each other's fires. Everybody's very well equipped to fight those fires. However, due to wind, whatever situations, they can become out of control. And they then go onto the property and everybody fights. But we are a neighborhood community, and typically they don't go after the farmer that starts those fires. If for some reason a fire starts and gets into your solar project and devastates your solar project, what will be your response to those farmers, your neighbors that accidentally started that fire? I'm aware that there's a 30-foot break around your fence. However, we have fires that jump the Deschutes River. So a 30-foot break sometimes isn't quite enough to start those. So is your company going to go after that farmer?
Great. Well, thank you for your question. And yeah, to clarify, you're just because you're looking at me, I'm with the Oregon Department of Energy, not affiliated with the company. But to answer your question, so what we do cover in our process is we do have a wildfire prevention and risk mitigation standard. It's a relatively new standard and new part of the council's process. It was adopted in, I think, 2022 or 2023 after some significantly bad fire years. So it is something new and it is kind of an evolving standard. What we require is for the applicant to, one, do a thorough analysis of whether wildfire risk is at the site. And that's both the risk of the facility itself causing a fire or what the risks of a fire coming through the site and spreading out would be. We also require them to look at mitigation procedures to say if there is a fire, how will they respond to it? What elements might be especially hazardous, and what how will they coordinate with local responders to make sure that the fires put out in a timely manner and that resources and people surrounding the site are protected. I will say that issues of liability are largely outside of the council's jurisdiction or the land use, and environmental review board. We don't have control over insurance or property rights or that kind of property damage liability. So I'll let the applicant team respond to that themselves. But I just did want to say that we do take wildfire very seriously. It's something that we are looking at. We are mainly looking at the risks of the site, though, not the risks of surrounding land uses to the facility.
Yes, and thank you again for your involvement here. I really do appreciate it.
And you had a great, well said, thank you.
So this is something that I'm going to get your answer. So I can speak up. All right, so this is something that I have been working to get an answer on. And so my understanding is, we do carry insurance to cover us in case of fire damage because things happen. There are lightning strikes that hit someone else's property, combines break down. And so it's also a very bad look for us to be suing our adjacent landowners. Believe it or not, these community leaders, your county commissioners, they hear about these things and they talk to each other. So it's I can tell you for sure from a PR standpoint, it's not a good look for us to do that, and we don't want and don't plan on doing it. What the only situation that I'm aware where that could be an issue is if there's issues of negligence. If there's someone out there starting using fireworks in the middle of the field, and I can't get into like what the definition of that is exactly, but that's where my understanding is that insurance would take issue with it. But if it's an accident, it's we're in it with it too. So we will be doing all we can to contain ours and the extent we can help, and we do have a wildfire standard. I'm not sure how much the public safety standard also plays in that. But we will be, we don't have a reason to for any sort of accidents unless it's clear negligence. So that's what I've heard so far. I'm still working to get more from answer, and we've heard that our team coming up further than and to try to show all the things you're going to be doing to try to mitigate fires. And you're right, the fires can't jump, across the issues. Fire breaks can happen, so we can do these little things. It's not going to be all stop all. You can still get something that happens, but at the very least, we can try to mitigate that. And that's if I have a chance to try to reduce it, we're probably going to try to. So that's what I found out so far. As I find out anything more, I'll continue to communicate with the community and to the extent it's standards and the exhibits, we'll put it into the PASC as well.
Thank you very much. Like an environmental people.
Yeah, can you, do you have a question already in the queue or?
Well, since we were already talking about.
Sorry, not that. It's easier that way than me regurgitating it.
In regards to the fires that could happen or have happened here, solar farms, what happens? I mean, is there like toxic smoke that, I was just wondering what would happen to.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, solar panels are non-toxic, so this will not be releasing any sort of fumes or anything that would be dangerous. I don't think so. It's my understanding, and I'm happy to track this down. I am a developer here. If I need to pull in my subject matter experts, I will 100% do that. I can get our engineers on it, to provide all the details about what's contained in those and what happens in the event of a fire. But it is my understanding that it does not have an impact, that it wouldn't have an impact in terms of dangerous things and smoke, more dangerous than would be your standard smoke. So.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, folks, I think we're gonna move back to just the format. I know everybody's got a lot of questions and concerns. If you wanna ask about this, please just, get us form and we're gonna take questions one at a time.
And to answer it a little bit further on about the fires tonight, they are rare. There are always the possibility of fires. Well, I mean, you're not doing anything out there. Lightning strikes happen. There's accidents happen, but we, believe it or not, have a very vested interest in trying to keep our facility operating at 100%. So we do a very good job of maintaining our property and do everything we can to reduce the possibility of fire. Aside from it being the right thing to do, that's the best thing works for business too, is to try to keep our facility running as well. So that's the best I can answer that one. And then just quickly to touch on batteries. My understanding, and this technology is changing, is that most of these battery components do contain or have self-contained fire suppression systems nowadays. It's been rare, but they have caught on fire. It's a new technology, but that has improved significantly the reliability of those and the safety of them. So that is something that will, as I said before, we have a vested interest in working with technology that is safe and will remain online, and that's our goal. They're all on rapid platforms as well. And so for those, I know that I've heard the question about what's in those. There's a little more technology in there that I wouldn't feel comfortable giving public testimony on or public comment on what exactly is in those, but I can certainly track down that information and get it from the people who are subject matter experts in the field. So I would hate to tell you something wrong right now about that.
And I will add, one of the things we look at is making sure that there's adequate coordination between the applicant team and local fire responders so that fire responders know how to safely respond to a fire. So depending on the technology that they build, depending on what kind of fire suppression system it does end up having, that firefighters can know how to come in and address it without making things more dangerous for themselves, without leading to more likelihood of a release of fumes if there are any issues with that, like at a battery fire, things like that. So there is a lot of work that goes into making sure that risks, that there are some risks, but that those are minimized to the extent that we can. Okay. So with that, I'm going to move to the next question. We have Amanda Whitman that has a form. Thank you, Amanda.
I'm Amanda Whitman, I'm with the Sherman County Solar Water Conservation District. And one of the questions I asked last week, but I think it's also for the state, is what long-term studies have been done on the effect of such a large scale solar facility on the native ground and also on the streams that are nearby and water temperatures in the ocean and wildlife habitat in those streams.
Great. And so if I understand, you're asking what protections there will be for those streams and for the fish.
No, I'm asking what long-term studies have been done.
Yeah, okay. I will actually ask for the applicant team. I can say what's normally required is both fish and wildlife habitat characterization studies, so we know what habitat is there. And then I'll let you speak again. You've already spoken a little bit about your wetland delineation and what waterways are present. So yeah, I guess I'll ask.
Yes, thank you. So we spoke last week. So I think specifically your question when you asked it to me was with regards to Buckskin Gulch, Buckley, just to the south of the site. And so specifically the wetlands up on the site, I don't believe are fish bearing, but the ones to the south down valley, that likely have fish. I can't say for sure because that's outside of our site boundaries, but I believe that it does when you say it does. And so specifically, you're asking me about the air temperature, if I remember correctly, and increasing that. Any sort of increase. So this is one I also went back to my engineers to get an answer on, and I got sent a study that I'm way through reading, which did. I'm happy to share the study. It was a public one, so if you contact me, I'm more than willing to send it over to you. But what I remember reading there so far, and like I said, you can ask me for the study, and I will send it to you. So that it is not just me saying this is what I remember, because I am wrong sometimes. I will fully admit that, but I do what I can. Is that there is and this was kind of a newer number to me, is that there is a few degree ambient air increase around the facility. But once you get within outside of like 300 feet, that goes down to virtually nothing. And that facility, that creek specifically should be plenty far away to, even if it was closer, 300 feet to get to zero difference from the facility. It should have zero impacts from the long-term operations of the facility. Again, happy to share that study with you. You should read it as opposed to having me regurgitate it.
Question for the record, was that Celsius or Fahrenheit?
Fair.
Thank you.
And again, happy to share that study so that let the experts talk about that.
Let's see. So the other thing I asked last week was that the ground would be used for there's some projects that they clear the entire project site. In this area specifically, it's really hard to reestablish native plants that are there. Typically, annual grasses and weeds coming instead of those natives. And so I just want to know what your approach on that would be.
So currently, over the
I can say, so what the evidentiary burden that they're required to say is that, adverse impacts on soils will be minimized. That generally means that things like unnecessary erosion, compaction, and other detrimental impacts to areas that aren't immediately occupied by the facility have been addressed and will be minimized. Often people address that through their DEQ construction stormwater permit, which includes a lot of best management practices that are required to prevent runoff from the site from going into streams or waters of the state. That's something I'll just mention to respond to your last question as well. We are aware that Buckley Creek is listed as essential salmonoid habitat, so we are looking very closely at potential impacts to that habitat and making sure that erosion issues in particular are being fully addressed at the site. That's something we'll be looking for in the application. But yeah, and as far as what specific plans you have for the site, so.
Yeah, so to talk a little bit further to that, we're still working on our design and our layouts, which as we get closer to construction, our civil engineering plans and what any grading needs to be done. We try to minimize that as much as possible because it costs more to go out there and grade and do all that. So kind of just generally as a rule, try to avoid that. We don't just go out and do a blanket rubbing of the site to just clear everything before we build. It's not ideal and usually largely unnecessary. So when we go out there and are building, what I'm not sure of yet is those exact amounts of grading we do try to minimize. And in addition to that, we haven't done the geotechnical studies yet to look at, to our pile of things, but they really do. We have the wet soil survey right now for what the soils are, but we haven't done any sort of subsurface testing to see exactly how far down that bedrock is. But based on community comments, it's not far down there. So there's probably a limited grading that we can do on site anyways. So I wish I could you more specifics about the plans and layouts, but we're just not at that stage of the project. But once we get there, I'm happy to kind of address those a little bit more.
And then my one other.
Excuse me, I got one more second.
I just wanted to add, with respect to create species, Maris had multiple meetings working on Fish and Wildlife. They actually met with ODFW prior to conducting surveys to identify any specific concerns of the species in the area. And they tailored their surveys, survey methodologies to ODFW input. And as Eric indicated in his presentation, they'll also have part of the application habitat mitigation plan. Be required component to invest in. And then another component, part of the application with respect to soil that Chris touched on, they'll include a draft erosion setting control plan, best management practices, and that's meant to hold soils, minimize erosion, minimize sedimentation, the site. So those are components of the application.
Okay, and speaking on that, just to make a comment, the county does have, in permit, or in our policy to contact the conservation district prior to implementation, and you're the one group that hasn't contacted us, so just FYI. And then, my last thing is that for USDA standards on this ground is currently ag, and once solar goes on it, it goes to industrial. After that 35 years, is it able to go back into ag?
Yeah, one of the things that the applicant will need to demonstrate in their application is that the site can be returned to a useful non-hazardous condition at the end of its life. So we'll both need them to describe what actions they'll do to restore the site to a useful non-hazardous condition. That just means that it doesn't need to be back to the exact same condition it was before construction, but it does need to be left in a form that is compatible with the uses like associated with the land use zoning. So land that is currently in agriculture will likely need to be able to be returned to an agricultural use, unless. Well, we have it, and that's one of the things that we will be looking for data on is what is the site restoration plan? What will it take to be able to restore the site? And what measures will they need to take to protect, soils so that they can be reclaimed at the end of its life? And the other thing I'll mention is that we do require all applicants for all facilities to provide a bond or letter of credit in the amount of money it would cost the state to restore the site if the applicant doesn't, if they default on their obligations to return the site to a useful condition. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, what I did actually. Okay, the next we have is Kathy Brown.
I just had a quick question on the battery storage. There is so many acres in White Paper, and if there was any greenhouse gases.
So in terms of I can speculate as to how much ours was. And Brittany, do you remember so for a 300 megawatt project that we are wrapping up construction on in New Mexico, 300 megawatts, 4-hour duration was 12 acres for the batteries. So I think as a ballpark, it's fair to extrapolate that. So multiply by 4, so 48, do math, 48 acres approximately. That's one thing I just realized I didn't mention in my presentation. You have one last component of the facility is an operations and maintenance building, and it's starting to become more common that these battery manufacturers want their own operations and maintenance building as well. So if you would add that to the footprint as well to the 12 acres, that probably pushes it up a couple more. But that's, again, that's kind of speculative right now, but that's actually a ballpark estimate.
And should they emit any gases?
So in terms of gases emitted, I am not aware of any, but I can certainly get my subject matter expert to say what exactly comes out. I'm not aware of any hazardous gases that come out, but I don't want to have a blanket statement for all gases. Lithium ion is the same technology that's used in most rechargeable batteries these days. So substantially similar to that, but I can certainly track down very specifics because things like that, I definitely would want to get a subject matter expert to provide a very concise answer. So if that is provided on comments, we can, I believe, get to respond to the comments. Or
these comments are more things that we'll be asking for you to address in your application.
okay, so there will be a detailed one reviewed by very much subject matter experts so that we can address that. I am personally not aware of one, but I'm also not an engineer and would want, we have excellent subject matter experts at the company. And we retain some of the best people at these, so I want them answering. They are the experts, but that is something I'm sure we can get addressed. And if you want that sooner than the next filing, I can certainly work to get that over to you. If you shoot me an email, I can provide you an answer on that. I'm sure we can track that down.
And one more question, do you know how much these batteries weigh?
That is a very good question. I know they come delivered, essentially assembled on, like, basically kind of the size of like a cargo trailer. I know they're offloaded by crane just because they come pre-assembled. Beyond that, I'm actually not entirely sure. That's a good question. Likewise, I can track that down. I'm sure that's something that our engineering team has.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. And just because I think it's gonna come up again, I was wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit more generally about the safety features that are built into battery energy storage systems, and also your plans for recycling or disposing of spent batteries.
Yeah, so I can speak a little bit to that right now. So the main thing that I was talking to ask about the main thing right there is that in fire suppression systems. So that's first and foremost the most important thing I believe in terms of the safety on those. We have on that. And I don't consider myself a battery expert, so I'm sure if we have one of our engineers here could go off on the list of things to stop servers or all these other things. I'm sure that's something I can back down if there's additional questions required on those. So more than willing to get the proper people on our team to answer any questions that the public might have about those. But we are very very limited. So we try to technology that's going to be reliable and stay online. Was there a second part of the question?
What your plans are for dealing with spent batteries and recycling?
Yeah, so we talk frequently about how the more the facilities are coming into place for recycling, solar panels. The panels likely will not be recycled for some time. Typically, what I hear is that they're usually good for about 18 years, and then after that, it becomes an economic kind of decision of look at, like anything, they kind of slowly degrade over time. So we'll make the choices at that time whether or not it's in our best interest to remove those panels and install new ones, which at that point might be higher wattage, and therefore we need less on the site. It's something we'll address as we get there. With batteries being a newer technology, I actually haven't answered a question yet about recycling those, so I'm happy to track down that information to see what battery recycling does look like. I know it exists, especially for the lithium-ion technology, because I know I have a pile of lithium-ion batteries sitting in my utility room to recycle right now, so it's out there. I don't have all the details on what that looks like for a utility scale.
No, that's fine. And one thing I will say is that we often at the department are looking, we don't have a particular vendor that they'll have to use or company. So we'll just be looking at what they are proposing to build is compliant with sets of general safety standards and often that people are following manufacturer specifications, which are the best way to make sure things operate safe. So.
Yeah, and just to touch base on that really quick, we, for any of our projects, go through a pretty rigorous financing process with banks for these. And so this is not something that you can get away with using. Oh, hey, there's this new technology from who knows where that's never been tested. Let's install this at a commercial scale. It has to be fully vetted by the banks, and that includes, believe it or not, if they catch on fire or something like that, they aren't working anymore, and then there's a cost to replace them. So just again, talking to the lowest common denominator, that we are very motivated beyond just the keeping, we want to be good members of the community, but just even from an economic standpoint, to use proven technology from quality vendors, because A, the banks won't finance our projects if we don't. So these will be, very high quality products that we use at the site, because otherwise we will not get our project financed and not get built.
Okay, the next question we have is Jamie Wilson. Jamie, if you're here.
You said that you are out of Boise, Idaho, and I just, Tropic Clemera is owned by a company called Light Renewable Energy headquartered in Israel.
Yes, that's our parent company, but yeah, our company started about 11 years ago in Boise, Idaho. We have 140-ish employees, roughly that, most of them based in the Boise, Idaho area, but yes, as with a lot of large renewable energy developers, there is, a parent company. So they are our current, parent company, and yes, they're based out of Israel. Yeah, and there should be, and like renewables and publicly traded. NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange? Yeah, one of those. So, and like you sure, yeah, but they are our parent company.
My only question was just the fires, and you guys basically, so, but then you said they're not toxic, and you have proof of that.
This is me answering, and I apologize. I can certainly track down all information about if there's catch on fire and what exactly that means. My understanding is that if there's a fire within the solar panels, that those materials, that they aren't hazardous materials. So I don't believe, but I can certainly track that down. I'm sure there's plenty of information out there on that. So I'm happy to, and if I'm wrong, I will tell you. Please, pardon me, public. I want to stay. If you think I'm wrong, let me know, and I'll do my best to track down the experts, because there's a lot of different components to a facility to know, and the development guy. So I'll do what I can to track down my experts to give you that answer.
Yeah, it's only over in Bay area, and loads of them told around here, we don't want to be anywhere near the practice on fire, don't go in, don't, just stay away, it's that bad. So this just doesn't really make sense what you're saying, you guys were planning to kind of has that protection at all times for this kind of stuff?
Yeah, so having not been there for the context of why they were saying that. So one of the things with our facilities is then if other people are going inside, so even this is a common question we get from like landowners, like, can I have a key to go inside the facility? But what if there's a fire? Can I go inside and fight that? It's generally the answer is no, because they can do, we don't want them hurting themselves, and that's a liability. So if you told me that another facility told the public they don't want them going inside, there's a variety of reasons for that, but I have not heard of the additional reason that it's causes a toxic plume to spread across. And see if you got something there. Did you look something up?
Just a major concern. Just a simple.
No, I've never encountered it where it's been the advice is to leave the general fire safety. So, but I'm happy to track that down. And
so it states solar panels and batteries contain toxic chemicals which like lead, cadmium, and silicon, tetrachloride that can be released into the air that are dangerous to inhale.
yeah, and I'd be interested on the source of that. So like I said, I can track down, get my engineers to give a proper response. So without knowing sources and the trustworthiness of what you can find on the internet, like you could, yeah, and I'm very happy.
And I'll just step in to say, once again, we are going to be looking to make sure that the fire hazard at the site is very thoroughly analyzed. And that includes what risks there are to people that live near the site and what needs to be done to respond if there is an emergency or a fire event. So I think it's fair to say this is one of the things we can definitely look into more closely.
Yeah, for sure. And,
make sure that
some
We
greater
had a
risk.
fire over here a couple of years ago and it was very toxic.
So you think,
There was a hemp fire over here, the building, and it was very, very toxic to this community. And, anyhow, little firefighters had to kind of keep it out and bring in all that stuff, and then it still has that, came clear out in 2 hours away. More like probably 4 hours by the time they got here. And it's just something that this community probably doesn't really need.
appreciate it. I very much do want to address that for you in a very formal, from subject matter experts way. So I can certainly look into all that information for you and get the proper.
Right, Jody Joe Bonnie. How about Catherine Nicole?
I have so many questions, I don't know where to start.
If we can't get them all out here, I can answer any questions you have by email as well.
Okay, well, I don't know how much liability insurance your company has on file.
That is an excellent question. I have never been asked the question before, but I can certainly have a insurance team in-house. I can reach out and get that answer for you, but I don't know off the top of my head. That's an interesting question.
Have you seen any of the contracts? Do you know what's in the contracts in terms of liability insurance? For landowners? For landowners, what's lined up?
So we have a land team that I've worked with and I have seen those contracts. Off the top of my head, I don't know. And also just as a matter of policy, I don't share landowner contract details. It's not.
I'll share them because I have it signed. Bright Light Solar is trying to build up on Big Love, PG. They want to do a solar project there. Like, well, they depend on transmission, but we have a lot of room open on the line, so it looks like they'll probably get phase one about 800 megawatts. Or 800 acres, sorry, 250 megawatts, or more. But I mean, that's the threshold. So their contracts say 1 million. 1 million.
I can't
A
speak
problem.
about
2 million. If a person is, you know, hurt.
And I can just say the contracts between applicants and property owners are outside of the scope of what we do. So I just want to point that, this won't be something that we'll be able to address.
It's not. It is not. And I think this community would suffer hugely if there's a fire. And we know from experience, they go after the man. You may not want to, you may not think you will, but the Bright Light rep in our shop 2 weeks ago said, well, we probably wouldn't. That's not good. That's where this mistrust is coming from. And even with the bonds, I was a health and safety expert for a coal mine in Utah. When the company went bankrupt, that land never got returned to it never did. They didn't have the money. And I think there's a lot of short-term thinking going on. And nobody's realizing these long-term implications in 35 years. Is that bonds to an either?
Yeah, and we require a bond to be carried through the life of the facility. So until it's,
That work nice.
It's not the same thing.
well,
5 years later, the cars that fire, we're fighting the courts right now with that.
I asked him, I go, "Will you come up with?
We have 11 members, they can solar. Listen to all this stuff. I'm gonna say this. Your neighbor comes on your property and gets hurt. He's not gonna sue you. He's your best friend. It's an insurance company gonna sue you. And so you, we're fighting this right now. Right now in the hospital. At the same perimeter, fire protection, all of that. But then what they do, they went and planted intermediate wheat grasses and put a half tall. And now it's there. They look, we gotta get them mowed down. They go, so we have a fire. We're like, I don't care what you do. I want to go to the courts. So you gotta come up with something better. Let's see, because we will get sued, not by you, insurance company. They're not gonna keep the loss. And I had $1 million nobody told us for. Not that we're your policy. We're allowed to. Not very long. I would talk.
And that's why I'm worried. Because it happens. You know, I've seen it happen. Lawns go away, the escrow amount's not enough to take out the wind towers we have now. Good intentions don't work 30 years down the road. And in terms of moth casting and lithium batteries, holy crap. I mean, I was just at 47 Catherine on a prayer, many case for Northwest Airlines Delta. And I don't know if you know about the Dubai crash in 2012. 22 minutes into the flight was incapacitated. And it was a complete cold. I mean, they went down. And it was a failure because they don't allow lithium batteries on passenger airplanes. And there's a reason. Runaways. So none of this, even though it seems theoretical, it's not. It's a very dangerous route to go with happening lithium batteries together.
So again, I do just want to point out two things. One, the wildfire mitigation plans that we require will be part of the public record, and they'll be something that you all can review and comment on when they're provided as part of the application. And we'd really encourage you to take a close look at those and let us know if you think there's something we're missing or there's something more that needs to be done to appropriately address fire risk at the site. And the second thing I just wanted to clarify about bonding, again, in our process, we do require that bond to be in place in our office and safe for the life of the facility. So it will be there until this facility is retired and we release the bond. The estimate of how much money we believe there needs to be to restore the site, again, will be part of the application, or we'll have you give an estimate, we'll review it. That's something also that the public can review. You can look at, you can see how we got to that number, and you can comment if you think it's inadequate.
We did that for our wind project, and they were supposed to be taking comments. They didn't care. They didn't take my comments. And they gave us enough money in escrow to take out a third of the project, period. So none of this is going to happen. It sounds great, but when it comes to the actual fire or the actual, decommissioning of the project, good luck, we're all going to be dead. So it sounds great in theory, but I'm not buying this whole thing. We've got to be back on the escrows. They're not working. And we have no real fighting ability here. Further out you get in the middle of nowhere, harder it's going to do to stop that fire. Substation fire in 2018, 78,000 acres burned. That's how bad our wind is here. It doesn't stop. This is a bad county we put into solar.
Well, thank you for your comments. Again, I can't speak to what's happened in the past, but we do take public comments every single system.
Really, not good intentions aren't working.
Okay, next we have Jennifer Smith.
Hi. You mentioned automatic fire suppression of the ESS. What does that look like? Is it all alarm?
Yeah, I can certainly get for that. Yeah, I know that's come up in the past, and that's what I can go, but I haven't asked about the specific details of what's in that aside from it's there. So I can certainly capable of getting those into the story.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
If you
like the Sherman County EMS.
Yeah, and we will certainly be talking to you in the not too distant future.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I can speak, we've seen applications that have, different kinds of fire suppression. There's some that use the foam, some that use an inert gas, and some that even use water. So it really depends on the manufacturer and what's inside of it. So. Okay, and our last comment, I have is Jessica Wheeler from Century.
And then, boy, let's go past the phone here. Some great questions, concerns, we've been, my name is Jessica Wheeler, I live outside Boston, and I'm actually a freelance writer for the Times Journal newspaper. So I just have a couple of, I had 3 quick questions and 1 comment. And I do mean question because compared to some of the very difficult questions that you guys just had. My notes that you had mentioned, you'll make these things as tall as possible. I was talking 10 feet, 15 feet. But what's the maximum allowable for this kind of structure?
So you might.
Oh, let me show you. I was trying to get in there. All right, can you hear me now? All right, so, how tall can you make these, solar panel building structures, or 1 to 10 feet, 50 feet? I've heard that you can have a wildlife crossing underneath them, maybe even crops underneath them. I understand with the chain link fence or in the perimeter, you make that tough, or for example, like corridor, but, what kind of clearance are you looking at?
Yeah, so there is a couple ways to answer this. So typically, what we will see is that for a facility, and I'm going to give a ballpark answer here because there's still questions about, what technology, by technology, which suppliers we select. But approximately, and this will all be included in our PASD. I think we already have information in our NOI about the height there, if I recall correctly, but I will be having our engineering take more specific answers, so I apologize. So, but at full tilt, just keep in mind that single axis tracker is going to turn throughout. So what you're going to have is the very beginning of the morning and then very end of the evening. I think typically what we see is about 10 feet. So that's normally what we see. Then the second kind of like adds questions to it is depending where you measure from, because if you were to have the post into the ground, if there's a dip down beneath it, and we have different amounts of slope tolerance we can take. I asked the engineers to come up with absolutely worst case scenario numbers, and I think they did that with a big old dip down in the middle, but we'll be very clear about that in all future materials. So typically it's about at worst when it's tipped all the way up. At the end of the day, and at the beginning of the day, it's approximately 11 feet. 11 feet approximately.
That's a good estimate. It's not 50. That gets us an idea. And actually, that leads into my next question, which was about the posts. No concrete for the posts. And I can tell you from experience, when I put in a chicken coop at my place outside Wasco, those posts are on concrete because the wind will take the entire chicken coop away. So, and we have deeper soil in the north end. The soil up there, I believe, is, less than that before you hit bedrock. And that was the question that I was trying to clarify earlier when I may have interrupted and made things a little chaotic. So, what do you do if you hit bedrock? Are you able to drill in the bedrock, and are you able to have concrete to these posts?
Yeah, so that's kind of part of the variability of having not done our preliminary engineering studies yet, is that we don't know which exactly or what exactly we're going to do for that yet. In an ideal situation, which I don't expect to be the situation for most of us, just based on what I've seen and based on public comment, it's all based on the soil conditions are on the site. And so there are situations where, as this technology continues to evolve, and just for how matching technology, even that's changing as people are developing in more places. So you could have a situation where if you're using the traditional piers that would resolve, it come from our engineering design team, or if there is bedrock just a little bit down, we could potentially pre-drill. Now I'm not sure how much, if any, cement would put in there. I can certainly track down that answer. If you agree to help grow, whether or not you can add some to it, I would want the team to give you the best possible answer to that. And then the other part of that is it would be, that drop not too far down. There are different technologies that can be pursued to not have to drill through who knows how many holes and costs like that. So there are ways to build shallower soils where the bedrock is more far down.
So if you come across shallow soil and bedrock right away, that's not necessarily a deal breaker. You may be able to work around that. And leads me to sort of a side question. How big are the posts? Because when we're talking fence posts that are maybe 6 inches, or T-posts, which are maybe 2 inches of metal, or like a spike. What kind of posts are you guys looking at? And that may or may not be the question you have the answer to at this point.
So it's one that I can't provide confirmation on what exactly. I can speak to what I typically see. And so one of my go-to examples is that project in New Mexico that I mentioned a few times that some of the pictures were from, and you're looking at personally, it's less than a foot, about 8 inches, I want to say, but that is purely on the part answer. If you do want an exact answer of what we typically see, I'm happy to put you in touch with our construction team.
No, that's also a good call for it. It's not like this.
That's correct. But like I said, based on the subsoil condition, what might be put in, that's our construction team is the experts, and they can give the best answer, and they know more technologies out there, other approaches that could be more. As we do those studies, we learn more.
But you do have your contact info, I'd like to email you further.
No, I'll just butt in on this. So we typically don't see the results of a full geotechnical investigation included in the application, but to satisfy our structural safety standards, we do require like a basic soil survey, a outline of what work will be done at the site to see what kind of foundation footings they'll be putting in.
So some of these details will come out.
Yeah.
Throughout the meetings of the order, and I think some of the public comment is keep your indicator here.
Yeah, exactly. So there will be at least, I think, a better idea when we get the application. We usually permit to allow some flexibility in final design. So that's something they'll have to have the ultimate answer on.
My last quick question, and again, quick, if you don't want to go into crazy detail, but you did mention 12 to 15 well-paying jobs, aside from the 300 plus construction jobs. So would these well-paying jobs be permanent or just for the construction period? And will they require a trade school or higher or secondary education or some sort of other specialized degree? Or, I mean, in a small community, 12 to 15 with well-paying jobs is not that bad, but I'm curious about the breakdown on that. If you have any info.
Yes, so the 12 to 15 you mentioned, those are well, like a form of the facility is operational. Those are
Are they
operational.
engineering or electricians or?
To be honest, I can try to get that information for you. So some, I'm sure some electrician, not, but I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but I can certainly get that information from our asset management team. So.
Sure, thank you. And then I will be in touch with you by email just for some follow-up questions. And my last thing was just a comment, having sat through lots of input from you folks and from the audience. No one certainly will deny the potential for energy production or the financial benefits from landowners who may or may not live here. I think the big concern I'm hearing is among the neighbors and the greater community. The locals here just dive in and fight fires. They don't flee from them due to liability risk. So the neighbors will come together to squash a fire. They're not going to bail on it. So this, the setup that you have for logistics is a bit different than what folks around here are used to doing. No matter who caused the fire, they're driving there. The tractors and just going to be going out there in the middle of the night and put their lives on the line to put out that fire, no matter whose land it is headed for, including yours. So, and that is clearly obviously not the newspaper stands. That's my own personal stance, having sat here and taken all this information tonight, from you folks and from the audience. I really appreciate you being here and willing to take questions, because it's definitely been informative. So I look forward to some of your next Q&A sessions. We shall see how this one goes. Look forward to connecting. That's by email, so if I do have questions, I can reach out to you online. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. And we still have a few folks left on the phone, so I do want to turn it over to see if any of them have questions or comments. If you do, please raise your hand. If you're on the webinar, you can click the participants button, which should be at the lower right-hand part of your screen. You do that, a little thing should pop up and you can raise your hand. And then if you're on the phone, just press start. Yeah, and if we have folks on the phone or not, I'll do one more round to see if there's remaining questions out there. It's okay. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any hands up. Okay. So seeing nobody on the phone, I understand we have somebody that wants to give a comment. Yeah, please come up, or you can hand it in if you don't want to give it in. Oh yeah, no problem.
Start with, what's the value if you waited this?
It depends what you mean by value. Are you talking about overall and in?
What are you going to insure for? You're going to insure for?
You know, that's the immediate question. Right now, we could build up to 1,200 megawatts, but build all that.
You can give me a ballpark.
To be honest, I can ask our insurance guy. That's something he has, but I just don't know nothing about the overall cost. Really give you
I did not Google it. You guys are living in exclusive use community. You're being given an extension by the state government to build an industrial site inside of the exclusive ag use. My son and I farm, we will be able to cut the rock. So one of my concerns, and I know you're tired of hearing about fire, and this is more than fire for me, this is about the right farmers. I'm curious if your company would be willing to sign an agreement with the county government that you would hold ag use exempt from any to get harmed by your. That would include dust from my farming operation landing on the panels, my livestock getting into your fancy. Believe me, we got those that can show you how to get to your fancy. Weeds, and it's specifically fire. We farm predominantly the upland direction from you guys. In 40-some years of farming, I've never had a fire. I hate to say that out loud in this room. It might turn next. I cannot afford to buy a policy big enough to cover your project. I know. And you told us that it would be, I forget the word you used here a little bit ago about negligence. Every day in this country, two lawyers get up in the courtroom and argue what that word means. And I don't trust that you did about that. I would like to know if you would be willing, your company would be willing to hold that ag community harmless to anything that would happen to your project.
And I'm going to jump in quickly and speak to what the legal requirements are. And so part of this process will be, like I said earlier, looking at compliance with statewide planning goals, including statewide planning goal 3, which is to protect and preserve farmland, since this land is on exclusive farm use land. So due to its size, they will need to give, like you said, what's called a goal exception, because they're using more acres than allowed under the current LCDC Land Conservation Development Commission's rules for how much land you can use to solar without a goal exception. And to get that exception from the council, they'll need to prove 3 things. One, that there's good reasons why the goal shouldn't apply in this example. So the goal to preserve farmland shouldn't apply. So they'll have to give us what their reasons are. They'll have to prove that socioeconomic and environmental impacts have been mitigated and in accordance with the other standards required by the council. And then 3, they'll have to show that the facility is compatible with adjacent uses, which basically means, if there is a demonstrated problem with dust from construction or from operation of the facility, getting onto your land and disrupting your agricultural practices, they'll need to mitigate that. And I think it also means that there'll need to be some assurance that you'll be able to continue farming your land and your customary practices without being affected by the proposed facility or without needing to really make a lot of changes to accommodate the proposed facility being on adjacent land. So I can't speak to whether or not they'll sign some agreement or go above and beyond what's legally required.
You said a minute ago, they got some factors, I just want to put it right.
Yeah, and so I'll let you respond to that, but I did just want to clarify what the legal standards.
Yeah, that's a very fair question. So the first part of your question is regarding your farming practices on adjacent lands. We understand that these are in the area, and I don't know why, as long as we're doing normal farming activities, why that shouldn't cause any problems at all. We understand that there's community, so they're going to be out there, it's going to create dust. We understand that, and that's something that we plan for. So I don't have any problem with that. In terms of the wildfire liability, this is something I'm still learning. I fully admit that. I haven't been asked that question until really recently that we were, it's come up, and that came up at our public meeting that we held last week. That's the first I actually got into it. That this is a very serious issue out here, and how do we address this? I want to have a proper answer. So that is what I've been told so far. I have no ability to talk about what that looks like. If someone's, I would speculate that what I might hear that if someone's intentionally setting fires directly adjacent to our project, they're not going to want to find it. There's negligence is there for a reason. And I can't say what exactly counts as that and what details. I'd be working on finding that out, but I don't know off the top of my head and would want to get those answers from someone who's qualified to me who can provide those and who's much more involved in the operations and management of the facilities as we move forward. This is a very good topic. I want to discuss this more, and I want to get more of the proper people in the room. So when we have to ask these questions, they do get run up the chain. It does go to our operations and maintenance team. It does, legal has to get involved too. It gets involved with that. And so I'm happy to provide as much information as I can about those, and I want to find out more about what exactly that means. What does the negligence mean? What is all this? So I will continue to try to more information. I'm sure will be contained in our PASD and as we move forward and as we continue to engage with the public, I hope to get a better and better answer for you. This is the information I have so far.
I still like, if they could take it to higher ups, if they'd be willing to sign something, hold us on.
It's something.
It's like Mike said, it's not necessarily you guys, if you sign something like that, it'd be pretty binding, but if you don't do something. The insurance company's got, I can cite all the time. Not me personally. Brand new common. And truck, brand new clear down. Start a fire.
Yeah.
Those insurance companies go try. Guarantee. Mike and Ken here. So I'll give you some contact information.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to hear all these. Send me awesome. You guys are informed and we're this is one of your largest concerns, if not your largest concern.
Not mine, but we don't have to.
Well, call me later. I'm happy to.
Great, thank you. Yeah, please. Could you please speak into the mic though? Sorry, do that, but so.
And to just further on to what Alan said in the same vein, we do, people that we know, it was a solar process. One of the things they say you have to watch for which is back to the dust issue again. They said that when dust does hit the solar panels, it takes a lot of the efficiency out of it. It's something that has to be continually cleaned and taken care of, and you're saying, yes, that's true. We are really testing.
To be clear, but he's nodding and he hears you. So in terms of dust, that is something that our operations and maintenance team takes into account as we model these projects, as we look at them. And it's one of the things that there is some effect from the dust, and we do have to occasionally maintain those. And it's my general understanding is that it is fairly infrequently. I can talk with our operations and maintenance team to see if I can get an estimate of how often that needs to happen. But yeah, we talk about to wash the panels essentially too, because you do get dust coming onto the panels that does reduce you blocking the sunlight. That's a little bit less you're generating, so that's certainly something that I don't know the exact amount of times. Sometimes you make projections and then they're wrong, but based on I'm sure they come up with this based on sites, how it is on the ground, nearby uses. It would be, I imagine, if you're, farming.
Inefficiency in that process?
I don't, sorry, he said, well, I just heard the inefficiency cost that, yeah, he said, yeah.
Well, when the dust comes down on the top of the panels, people cause inefficiency. Is there a study on that? Do you know?
Oh, I mean, I don't know, to be honest. So it does cause less to be generated. Like there's no, like if you block the sunlight, there's less. I mean, the most that I've heard at a site for how much they estimated to be cleaning in a year was 3 times. So it's not, and if it was so significant that it was reducing their productivity by a lot, then it'd be out there being cleaned a lot more often. Because oftentimes the economic, how they look at it is, okay, how much does it cost to clean the panels? How much efficiency are we losing? At what point does it tip the scales to, okay, time to get out there and clean it? So if it's, and the worst I've heard is like 3 times a year, which maybe it's more here. It could be, this could be the most I've ever had to have panels cleaned. But that's something that we'll be taking a close look at, but we understand that there's farming uses in the area, and that's going to add a little bit of soil to the panels. Yeah. And that's anticipated.
Okay. And I'll just restate again that part of our process will be to make sure that the facility doesn't interfere with people's adjacent farming uses. That means that we will expect that people can continue doing what you're doing now on your land, and that the applicant will have a course of action against you. Some counties have like particular legal mechanisms in place to report that with the county. That will be something that we'll be looking into as to what the requirements in this county are, or whether other mechanisms are appropriate. And then I did just also want to add, for dust leaving the site, we have typically required applicants to submit a dust management plan for construction in particular. We know that grading, building roads, that can create a lot of dust, and so we'll need them to have adequate measures in place to make sure that doesn't get out of control. We'll also need them to prove that they can get water from a legal and reliable source in the amount needed to do dust suppression. We found that requires a lot of water. It is a high demand use. So if the soils look particularly erodible when we get that information, we'll be looking to make sure that there's a adequate amount of water estimated, and that they have the contracts or agreements in place where they're reasonably likely to get those contracts or agreements with an appropriate water provider to make sure that they can do what they say. Yeah. And if you have another question, please come up. Please do speak.
I get that you don't plan to let the project interfere with the farming next door, but I guarantee you we'll have to hand over the keys to our farm if we start a fire. That's how it's going to be. It's just a fact. We don't have enough insurance.
Now, I'll say again that, it is a little outside of the scope of our thing. I think we've heard this enough from this group that we'll have our legal team look into it too, just to see what, or how that can be addressed in the council's things, if it can. But again, generally those liability issues are not something that we can address directly. Sense. Great. So I'll go ahead and take a last call for comments from people in the room. Yeah. Should we have one more?
Good evening. So my quick question. Facility. What do you guys want to do underneath the panels in this facility? Because that plays a lot in this fire discussion. You just have gravel there, that's one thing. I mean, obviously, you probably don't want to be very erosion concerns. So I just wondered about this phase of the project. What do you guys anticipate underneath the panels? Things like vegetation. Yeah.
Yeah. So we need the water. So there will be something under there. It's not gravel for us. I'm not saying it's not. I would expect that there's been some sort of what I've seen in the past, some sort of reseeding, once construction is done, because we do want to keep the dust down. In terms of what exactly that is, I mean, typically we prefer some sort of kind of more native plant because the soil structures are usually within this is, I see you're wearing an OSU wheat shirt, so I have a feeling you know way more than me. But I typically would like to see what my understanding. And I can certainly get more information on what we typically do on the sites. But my understanding is there's a preference for the native grasses because they don't grow as high and there's root structures retain or keep the dust down better than your cheap grasses and other weeds that if you just leave it, let it regrow on its own, that's less than.
I just think that's a critical piece. I think the question is that, make sure you don't have a bunch of time for annual grass like cheatgrass. I'm sure you thought about, the key part of this that you're gonna have a maintenance period that's gonna be keeping that vegetation managed so that it protects the landowner. If it does roll through, it's not gonna cause roll facility right now. And also protects you through the fire. People riding
Exactly, that's all factored in, and we also don't want plants that are high enough, as they tip down all that way, we don't want additional shading, so, and it's oftentimes the more, especially in this area, my understanding, the more that don't grow as tall, so it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, and I'll just add things that you can look for in the application will probably include a noxious weed control plan to make sure that noxious weeds aren't uncontrolled at the site. Vegetation management standards for wildfire management. We've been looking more into management of invasive annual grasses as a fire risk at the site too. So that'll all be something that becomes available as part of the record that you can look into. So glad that you brought that up. Okay, any last comments from anybody in the room? Thank you all for being here tonight and for providing a great discussion. We really appreciate it. What's that? Oh yeah, we'll be here for a few minutes if anybody has any individual questions. Otherwise, yeah, please feel free to reach out. Thanks, yeah.